Alright guys, in this video, I'm going to be doing a bit of a reaction to multiple articles that I have come across. This was not something I was expecting to really be talking about this much, but this is something that is persisting. That is Sony buying Square Enix. It seems like this is a rumor that just won't go away. And whether or not there's any truth to it, well, we don't know. But what I want to do is kind of cover the latest that is being said here about Sony acquiring this publisher, and I also just kind of want to talk about it and give my thoughts on it, and in a way just react to this information and let you know what I think about it. So before we dive into this, do me a favor, hit the like button to help the video out and show it your support, and if you are new here to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well. So as I said, there are rumors that are persisting that Sony is apparently looking to acquire Square Enix. This is something we discussed briefly earlier in the week, but since then, it's just kind of picked up more and more steam. And I've seen multiple people who were once very skeptical, very hesitant, kind of change their tune, and suddenly they're turning around and saying, well, actually, maybe this is something that could happen. If you think about it, of all the publishers out there, Square Enix probably makes the most sense. Now, the most important thing to highlight here is the recent news, official news regarding Square Enix, that being that they sold some of their Western studios to Embracer Group, that being Eidos Montreal, Square Enix Montreal, and Crystal Dynamics, as well as some of their IP, a lot of their IP, such as Tomb Raider and Deus Ex. Again, this is what we covered earlier in the week, and the reason why people were bringing up Sony is because they started to speculate, well, is Square Enix selling these studios and selling this IP at such a low price because they're trying to make themselves look more appealing to be acquired? Is it possible, and to me this is the most interesting speculation, is it possible that Sony was in talks or has been in talks for some time now to acquire Square Enix, but one of Sony's requests is they want Square Enix to sell off some of these studios and some of these IP that they feel like they really don't want or need? Is that a possibility? Well, I want to say I absolutely think that's a possibility. But that's pretty much all we had to go off of. Now, not too long after the official news from Square Enix letting us know that they're selling some of these studios to Embracer Group, it did catch quite a few people by surprise. Jeff Grubb came out and he said, yeah, this was the acquisition that I was referring to back in March. For those who don't remember, there were multiple rumors and some pretty significant rumors that were coming from seemingly you would consider somewhat reliable sources, people who have contacts in the industry, and they were teasing a major acquisition when it comes to Sony. They were saying that they were hearing from sources that Sony is getting ready to make a big acquisition, and nothing came of it. Nothing happened. But now we have somebody else who was involved in that conversation coming out here and letting us know that, yeah, this is the same thing that they heard. So this is an article from PlayStation Universe where it says, according to Greg Miller in the most recent PS I Love You podcast, he heard from multiple sources that Sony was looking at buying Square Enix. Greg Miller does clarify this, though, saying that he heard this rumor prior to the Embracer Group's announcement of its acquisition of Eidos Montreal, Square Enix Montreal, and Crystal Dynamics. He explains that he's unsure if what he heard meant Sony was also potentially up to acquire Square's 3 internal Western studios, or if they are still looking at buying Square Enix as a whole. When I talked about the 3 rumors I had heard, and one was an acquisition, this was the one I had heard. I'd heard that PlayStation was acquiring Square, and I'd heard that from multiple different sources. Is it happening or is it not? Was it just scuttlebutt? You're hearing things third, fourth, fifth hand. The article ends by saying Miller points out that the possibility of it is still real in the sense that if 2022 has taught us anything, it's to expect unexpected acquisitions, particularly big ones. We know that Sony is nowhere near done with acquisitions with all of the PS5 exclusive titles coming from Square Enix. This could very well be on the table. And this is where I really just kind of want to say that I'm not necessarily anticipating or expecting Sony to acquire Square Enix. But if you were to ask me, was Sony trying to acquire these 3 studios that Embracer Group picked up, as well as some of the IP, no, I don't. I don't think that's a situation that was going on at all. I say this because Sony could have very easily acquired these studios and this IP. Sony could have very easily paid more than the $300 million that Embracer Group has. Again, it's beginning to seem more likely, I don't want to say it's very likely, but more likely that this is Square Enix's way of, again, I have to kind of phrase it this way, it's no offense to these studios or the IP, but the reality is they were losing Square Enix a lot of money, and that was very likely due to the mismanagement that Square Enix was just, enacting upon these studios over and over again. It was just very poorly managed. It seems like they were trimming the fat, and they want to make themselves look more appealing to be acquired. I mean, we know that when it comes to these acquisition deals, these talks can happen for months. They can go on for a long time, and they're negotiations. It's a lot of back and forth, and that's why these rumors are difficult to kind of nail down when it comes to how much truth is there to it. I think a general rule of thumb to go by is to assume that everybody's talking to everybody to some extent. And this is where you kind of have to just evaluate the landscape and look at the way Sony, how they interact with Square Enix, vice versa. What is their relationship like? What is their partnership like? I mean, we're seeing things like Final Fantasy 16 being exclusive to the PS5. We're seeing games like Forspoken being exclusive to the PS5, where they explicitly announce it's going to be exclusive for not 1 year, but 2 years. I mean, at that point, you may as well just call it a full exclusive, right? Who's going to be sitting back and waiting 2 years to play Forspoken on an Xbox? Something tells me very few people are going to do that, if anybody at all. You have games like Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, here's where things get interesting, in my opinion. It's not just those single-player JRPGs that would fit perfectly underneath PlayStation Studios. They already do fit perfectly there. I mean, we kind of joked around before that would Sony even need to acquire Square Enix, considering how many of their games are already exclusive and how close they already are. Square Enix does have some expertise in live service. Look at a game like Final Fantasy Online or Final Fantasy XIV, right? This is a game that is one of the top live service games. And we look at something like Outriders. I don't think anybody views that as a top tier live service game, but we have seen Square Enix's interest in trying to pursue live service titles alongside their single-player JRPGs. And what I'm trying to highlight here, and I think that this is the most important point I could make, and if anything, it really does kind of show you just how likely Square Enix maybe is to be acquired by Sony. What Square Enix is doing really lines up perfectly with what Sony is doing. You see, that's the thing that we need to pay attention to here. Now, I know that Square Enix recently said that part of the reason why they're selling off their studios and some of their IP and, selling it for $300 million is they want to take that money and invest it in like the blockchain and NFTs. That's just dumb. I mean, there was a report recently that revealed that NFTs, they're pretty much done. They're not making any money. They've dropped by 97% or something. Just something really drastic where it's like, yeah, this is not the future. You could tell this is just not something that's going to catch on. So I have a feeling that Square Enix, them saying that, it's probably not going to work out that way for them. I don't think anybody is cheering for Square Enix being like, yeah, take that money and invest it in NFTs. No. But again, if you look past that and you look at what they're kind of doing with their studios, the studios that they now have, their Japanese studios, it's a combination of single player, high quality single player games, big franchises, and then also pursuing and continuing to maintain their live service games. Granted, Square Enix has, had a few failures or a significant failure, certainly with the Avengers with a live service, but still, this is maybe where Sony sees potential. They think, well, if we were to acquire Square Enix, maybe we don't need these studios. Maybe we don't need Eidos Montreal or Square Enix Montreal or Crystal Dynamics. We don't necessarily need those IP, but maybe what we do need are more JRPGs. Maybe what we do need is to make sure that we can keep Final Fantasy exclusive to PlayStation. that if Forspoken somehow ends up being like a big hit, that we can lock that down permanently. That we can get a game like Final Fantasy XIV, right? We can get a live service game like that, and that can be ours. And again, we can kind of leverage the expertise from the development team who worked on that, similar to like what Sony did with Bungie, right? This is where I can seriously see Sony acquiring Square Enix. But for as much as I think it makes sense, again, I want to emphasize, I don't necessarily want to say that I'm anticipating this or I'm expecting it. But what I can say confidently is that if Sony were to announce before the end of this year that they are acquiring Square Enix, I would not be shocked. I would be, certainly surprised because it's a big announcement and it's like, whoa, like that's crazy. But it would be one of those things where it's like, you know what? I kind of saw this coming. Like I really did. And it's not just because of the rumors, but we've been talking ever since we found out that publishers were on the table, right? Ever since we found out that publishers are up for acquisition, Square Enix was, a publisher that kept coming up in regards to Sony. So, yeah, I just wanted to cover this because I think there's a few interesting takeaways, and I wanted to react to it because I was not expecting to continue to be talking about this for this long, and who knows, maybe this is a conversation that's going to continue. Again, it's very important to understand that we cannot assume anytime we hear a rumor from a supposed insider that it's going to be true. This is why we always go with the saying, take it with a grain of salt, because you always have to be skeptical. But to me, it really does seem like there may be something to this. And logically speaking, sensibly speaking, there's a lot of reasons here why Sony might want to be looking at Square Enix. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. At this point, I want you to leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think Sony is already in the process of making a play on Square Enix? Or do you think that they're going to? Or do you think that this whole thing was just kind of a mix-up and this is all it really was? Square Enix selling a couple of their studios and maybe Sony was considering it, but then they walked away. Let me know down in the comments below. Again, leave the video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.